You must be wondering if life in ancient Rome was as expensive as it is now? Well, you'd be surprised at what you could afford back then. Let's take a look at some of the everyday essentials, housing, wages, and even luxuries that made up the cost of living in ancient Rome. Let's see if life was as pricey as it is now. Let's start with the basics. Food. You're in the heart of Rome, surrounded by the smell of fresh bread and herbs. You walk up to a bakery stall, and here's where your asses come in handy. A simple loaf of bread would only cost you about 1 to 2 asses. Now, asses were among the smallest Roman coins, worth just a fraction of a denarius, the main silver coin. In today's money, that's around $2. Not bad for a staple that every Roman depended on, and bread wasn't just a single type. You could find basic loaves, or if you had a bit more to spend, you might treat yourself to a slightly fancier loaf with a few added ingredients. A bread with a sprinkle of salt or seeds might cost a little more, but even then it was affordable for most Romans. If you wanted to pair that bread with some fresh fruit or olives, you wouldn't have to reach too deep into your purse. A handful of grapes or olives would only set you back another as or two, just around $2 today. Fruits and vegetables were common and affordable, so the average Roman diet was actually pretty wholesome. And, of course, we can't forget the wine. Wine was as common in Rome as bread. Even a modest quality wine might cost you another as or two per liter, about $2 per liter in today's terms. It was considered such an essential part of Roman life that people of nearly every class enjoyed it with their meals. Some wines, especially those from famous regions like Falernum, were expensive status symbols. Higher quality wine could cost several denarii per liter. Think of it as the ancient version of a fine vintage, costing over $100 today. Only the wealthier Romans would indulge in such luxuries. So, whether you get tired of bread and wine every day? That's another question. Now, along with wine, olive oil was another staple, an absolute necessity in Roman kitchens. A liter of good quality olive oil would cost around 6 to 8 asses, so $12 to $16 by today's standards. Romans used it for everything: cooking, lighting lamps, making soaps, and even as a moisturizer. It wasn't just food, it was a lifestyle essential. Need some clothes? In ancient Rome, clothing wasn't as simple as a quick shopping trip or an online order. If you were looking for a basic wool tunic, the go-to garment for most Romans, you'd have to save up a bit. A standard wool tunic would cost you around 15 to 20 denarii. Now remember, a denarius was a big step up in value compared to the tiniest coins, so 15 to 20 denarii meant a fair amount of money, equivalent to around $600 to $800 today. For the average Roman, this wasn't something you'd buy lightly. A tunic was an investment, and you'd probably wear it often, patching it up or even repurposing it as it aged. The wool tunic was practical, it kept you warm, lasted a long time, and was easy to wear. But there were levels to Roman fashion. Wealthier Romans could afford more elaborate garments. Maybe a dyed tunic, which was a bit pricier, or even a toga, the symbol of Roman citizenship and wealth. If you wanted a tunic dyed in a deep color like red or purple, the price could easily jump to 30 denarii or more, since dyes were expensive and labor-intensive to produce. That would be like spending $1,300 or more today, definitely for those with a little more wealth. And clothes weren't just about tunics. A basic pair of leather sandals would set you back about 10 to 15 denarii, or $400 to $600 today. And for the ultra-rich, adding jewelry like rings, bracelets, and brooches, you could be looking at hundreds of denarii for a single outfit. So, for the average Roman, clothing was a significant expense. You'd carefully budget and make sure you got the most out of each garment. But for those with wealth, dressing in elaborate togas and accessorizing with fine jewelry was as much about status as it was about style. What about housing? Whether you were an everyday laborer, a craftsman, or even a merchant, most Romans lived in insulae, apartment buildings that could reach up to 5 or 6 stories high. If you wanted to rent a small apartment here, a modest one-room space might cost around 2 to 4 denarii per month. That's about $100 to $200 today. Affordable, right? But there was a catch. These apartments were cramped, and the higher up you went, the cheaper, but also the riskier they became. Fire was a constant danger, and upper floors were prone to collapse since they weren't as structurally sound. For the average Roman, this meant living simply. You'd likely have one or two small rooms with space for a straw bed, maybe a small hearth for cooking, and some pottery for storing food and water. But for a lot of Romans, this was enough. And with neighbors packed close by, apartment life was bustling with activity and community. But let's say you had bigger dreams and wanted to buy your own home. Buying even a modest single-story house would set you back between 200 to 500 denarii. Now, that's roughly $10,000 to $25,000 today, a big commitment. For this price, you'd get a small home with a few rooms, and maybe even a little courtyard in the center. This was a dream for many Romans, giving you privacy, security, and a more comfortable space to raise a family. But it was usually an option only for those with steady income and some savings, like successful merchants or skilled craftsmen. Of course, the wealthiest Romans lived in grand villas with spacious courtyards, mosaics, gardens, and multiple rooms. These could cost thousands of denarii, even over 1,000,000 sestertii, the bronze coin. We're talking a price equivalent to millions of dollars today, certainly out of reach for most. So, for the average Roman, a simple apartment was the affordable choice, while owning a house was a big step up. Now, let's talk about wages. Just like today, your job made all the difference in ancient Rome. Let's start at the bottom. If you were an unskilled laborer, maybe a farmer, builder, or porter, you'd probably earn around 5 asses per day. In today's money, that's roughly $15 today. Just enough to cover basic needs like food and rent. Life wasn't easy for unskilled workers. They'd have to budget carefully to make ends meet. Most had no job security, so if work ran out, so did the money. Now, if you were a Roman soldier, you'd fare much better. An average legionary, one of the backbone soldiers in Rome's powerful army, earned around 300 denarii a year, plus occasional bonuses for victories or long campaigns. That's roughly $15,000 per year today, which may not sound like a lot, but it was a steady income, and soldiers had some extra perks. On top of the base pay, soldiers often received land or extra cash after a successful campaign. They also enjoyed some social respect and security, which gave them more opportunities than the average laborer. For a young man, joining the army was a ticket to stability and a potential path to a comfortable retirement. And then we have the doctors. Skilled physicians were highly valued in ancient Rome, especially those with training and experience. A successful doctor could make around 10 to 15 denarii a day, a serious wage back then. In modern dollars, that's $500 to $700 a day. Doctors didn't just work for the average Roman. Many were hired by wealthy families or even Roman officials who could afford top-quality care. So, if you had medical skills, ancient Rome was one of the best places to be. Medicine was a respected and profitable career if you could build a reputation. So, just like today, ancient Rome had its wage disparities. Unskilled laborers earned just enough to scrape by. Soldiers had stability and respect, and skilled professionals like doctors could make a substantial income. Your job and skills really determined your lifestyle in Rome. Some things haven't changed much, have they? And let's not forget about entertainment. Ancient Rome was all about big, thrilling spectacles. Gladiator games, chariot races, theater performances. These were more than just events, they were a way of life. Getting a ticket to one of these epic shows was surprisingly affordable. A seat in the arena would only cost you around 1 to 4 asses. Practically everyone could afford it, from laborers to senators. The idea was that everyone, regardless of status, could enjoy the games. After all, it kept the people happy and loyal to the empire. Then there were the public baths, another essential part of Roman life. These weren't just places to get clean, they were social hubs, where Romans would gather to relax, gossip, and even exercise. And just like the Colosseum, they were affordable for nearly everyone. Entry to a public bath cost around 1 as. For that price, you could spend the entire afternoon soaking in hot or cold pools, getting a massage, and catching up on the latest news with friends. And of course, there were chariot races. The Circus Maximus was Rome's largest stadium, capable of holding over 150,000 fans. Admission was usually free, sponsored by politicians hoping to win public favor. So anyone could come and cheer on their favorite team, the Reds, Whites, Blues, or Greens, and be part of the intense rivalry. In ancient Rome, you didn't need to be wealthy to enjoy life's pleasures. For just a few coins, you could watch thrilling games, soak in luxurious baths, or experience the roar of a chariot race. Entertainment was accessible to everyone, making it an integral part of Roman culture. Now, education. In ancient Rome, schooling was a private affair. There weren't any public schools like we have today. Most students would pay a fee to a private teacher, which could range from 1 to 3 denarii per month per student. That's like $50 to $150 a month in today's money. Not cheap for the average family, but education was seen as a valuable investment, especially if you wanted your children to rise in society. Wealthier families would even hire private tutors for their children, with fees climbing even higher. So, while education was accessible, it was still a financial commitment, making it more common among the upper and middle classes. And now, weddings. Roman weddings were important social events, and while they didn't require expensive white gowns or huge banquets like we see today, they still came with costs. The bride's family would provide a dowry, which could range from a few hundred to several thousand denarii, depending on the family's wealth, equivalent to anywhere from $5,000 to over $100,000. Weddings involved rituals and feasts, and wealthier families would sometimes go all out with entertainment, feasts, and lavish gifts. For the average Roman, though, a simple ceremony followed by a modest family meal was enough. Still, weddings could be a considerable expense, especially if the family wanted to show off a bit. Now, onto legal fees. If you found yourself in court, you'd likely need a lawyer or advocatus. For a simple case, legal services might cost around 10 to 20 denarii, which is around $500 to $1,000 today. But if you needed a top-tier lawyer or faced a more complex case, fees could skyrocket into hundreds of denarii, putting a big strain on your wallet. Wealthy clients often spared no expense to hire the best legal minds, but for most Romans, legal fees were a serious financial hit. The average person might try to avoid court altogether unless it was truly necessary. And let's not forget medical costs. Visiting a doctor wasn't cheap, especially if you wanted one with a solid reputation. A consultation might cost anywhere from 2 to 10 denarii, so around $100 to $500 today, depending on the doctor's experience and the severity of the illness. If you needed a complex treatment or surgery, fees could be even higher. Medicine was a respected and well-paid profession, but it meant the average Roman had to think twice before visiting a physician, especially for anything less than serious. So, from schooling to weddings, legal services to healthcare, life in ancient Rome came with a range of costs, some affordable, some a real stretch. Every decision, whether sending a child to school or seeking legal help, required careful planning and budgeting. Just like today, your lifestyle depended not only on your earnings, but on how well you managed them. So, while some things in ancient Rome were surprisingly affordable, others were still luxuries reserved for the wealthy. What would you spend your money on if you lived back then? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more of our content.